Carl, we are live. Let's get going.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. I am 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗏, and I'm with my colleague and friend, Walt Hampton, and we're very excited that you're with us today, and we thank you in advance for your time. We've got a lot of material on advanced emotional intelligence, which is a dynamic topic, and it also happens to be fun. So without further ado, we'll get going, and feel free to pop anything in the chat as we go. Walt and I will be monitoring it, and you can interrupt the cadence. It's not a problem. We're here to answer whatever questions you have. But again, grateful that you're here and looking forward to spending time together. So emotions, as we know, run through us all the time. We're subject to a constant stream, especially in the 24/7 world we live in. We never seem to be off. iPhones are welded to our heads for better or for worse. And our brains are wired to make us emotional creatures. So usually our first reaction is an emotional one. We don't have any control over the hardwiring, but we do have control over the thoughts that follow. And that's what we're going to cover and talk about today.
Yeah, I love the way you've set this up, Carl, because it's actually hardwired and dialed into us in the way we're designed physiologically. You've got this great image of this tiger there, and when we were early in our evolution, we had the brain stem, the reptilian brain, and as we grew and evolved as human beings, and now today professionals and highly trained thinkers, we have this frontal cortex. But what the original design was that stimulation, sensation from the environment would come in through our brain stems, that old reptilian brain that's still located back at the base of our brain. The input, the stimulation would come in, and today it works its way very quickly to our frontal cortex. But in between our frontal cortex and our brainstem, our reptilian brain, is this thing called the amygdala. And the amygdala, it mediates these signals. And what happened before the evolution of the frontal cortex was that the amygdala would immediately put us into fight, flight, or freeze. And we would react in order to survive. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, now we have the option of actually thinking things through and having control. But what all too often happens is we get, and this is in the vernacular, a hijack of the amygdala. And what we have the opportunity to do through this work that we're talking about today is to stop that hijack and become much more mindful and intentional about how we engage in our lives and in our workplace.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So what is emotional intelligence? This is not a dictionary definition, but it's basically your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others. And for those that like, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but for those that like acronyms, an easy acronym for emotional intelligence is RUM. Recognize, understand, and manage your emotions in yourself and others. That is distilled into its simplest terms what emotional intelligence is. So it's 4 key skills paired under 2 primary competencies. And you've got the left side of the ledger and the right side. You've got personal competence, self-awareness, self-management, social competence, social awareness, and relationship management. We cover this in our full day workshop. So what we're going to do today, we're going to give you as much information as we can, but we're going to focus on the personal competence, the self-awareness and self-management, because those are really foundational to the social competence. But you can put these in these buckets. Self-awareness is what or how you feel and self-management is what you do. Similarly, social awareness is what or how you feel, and relationship management is what you do. So, unlike your IQ, the EQ, your emotional intelligence, is not fixed and can be learned, which is a good thing, because for the first time in almost 90 years, IQs are actually slipping. Northwestern and the University of Oregon released a study in 2023, which shows in the 18 to 22 age group, IQs have declined for the first time since 1932. IQ points usually go up 3 to 5 points per year. We're now seeing a decline. So if we can work the EQ muscles and increase our EQ, all the better. So it's really, emotional intelligence is not about getting rid of emotions. We can't do that, but it's rather having control over them. And that's where we're focused today. So why does EQ matter? This is, if you wanted a business case for EQ, this is it. You can see tested along 33 other workplace skills, including time management and communication. EQ overshadows almost all of them. It accounts for 58% of success in all types of jobs. You see the majority of top performers are also high in EQ, and you can earn more money. The studies show you can earn more money with a higher EQ. But here's an even more compelling reason to focus on emotional intelligence training. 1,484%, just shy of 1,500%. And what is that? That is a company's return on investment if they invest in EQ competency-based programs. So where does the return on investment come from? 50%, it's well documented that 50% of employees quit because of a bad manager. So the ROI in the first bucket comes from EQ training. And you can reduce employee turnover and accompanying costs like the ones that are listed. And according to the Wall Street Journal, those costs can get up to 2 times the salary of the employee that you are replacing. Lost training, the replacement cost, separation, recruitment, and new employee training. So that's the first bucket where the return on investment comes in. The other buckets, you've got an increase in productivity. When EQ competency-based programs are implemented, there is a 40% increase in productivity. And this third bucket is a market value and corporate reputation. 44% of a company's market value and 45% of its corporate reputation are attributable to a CEO's reputation, per the Harvard Business Review. So the higher IQ in the C-suite, positive market value and reputation. And does that matter for any and all companies, including not-for-profits? Absolutely. There are some that think not-for-profits don't need to turn a profit, which is categorically incorrect, because a not-for-profit needs to generate profit to reinvest in its brick and mortar and its programming and the like. So those generally are the 3 buckets where the return on investment comes from. Again, almost 1,500%. So we're going to talk a bit here on personal competence. We're going to go into, again, the self-awareness and self-management. And self-awareness, what or how you feel; self-management, what you do. And again, social competence, which we're going to touch on at the end of the hour: social awareness, relationship management. So self-awareness could be described much like Clint Eastwood's 1966 movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because we all have emotions that are good, that are bad, and then can get ugly. Brené Brown, who's a leadership author, podcaster, and a professor, she had a viral TED Talk on vulnerability. There's a great quote, which I'd like to share with you, from Brené Brown, and it says, she said, "Who we are is how we lead. Self-awareness, kindness, vision, accountability, trust, just basic skills of being a good human being to other human beings. So that really tees up self-awareness. And again, it is the ability to accurately perceive your emotions in the moment and understand your tendencies across those situations. And this is very, very important because a study came out a few years ago in Psychology Compass trade journal, which found that only 36% of us are able to accurately identify our emotions as they happen. So there are 64% of us that don't know what's coming at us. 36% of us do. And we do ignore emotions at our peril. I spoke at a conference a few weeks ago, and the keynote speaker was Institute for Wellbeing in the Law, and the keynote speaker talked about emotions. And she was of the opinion that we ignore emotions at our peril. And that's very well said. And the emotions that we have, they act like an alert system. They are an alert system. If you're driving down the road and the fuel light comes on in your car, you address that. You get fuel for your car. If your tires are low, you address that. You put air in your tires. But many times emotions come at us and we ignore them, but we need to address them.
So everything starts with this ability to identify clearly how we're feeling in the moment. Not only our ability to self-manage and self-regulate, but it's also the condition precedent for being able to read a room. It's the condition precedent for stepping into a conflict, an office drama, a workplace drama. It's the condition precedent for being able to bring order out of chaos. So starting with this fundamental cornerstone of emotional intelligence, which is the awareness of how you are in this very moment, is key. And so what I want to invite you to do, and don't do this if you're driving, but you can do it later. It's an exercise that we often lead with in our full day workshops. Right now, I'd love for you to write down, or if you're driving, you can think about this, but write down how you're feeling right now, which ought to be pretty easy to do, but not always, because in any moment in time, we've got conflicting feelings. So it might be, well, I'm feeling interested but distracted, or I'm feeling like I'm not quite sure whether this is going to be useful for me or not, or however it is you're feeling right now. Or it could be happy, engaged, whatever it is. How are you feeling right now? And I'll often give it, 2-3 minutes for the full version of this exercise. But as quickly as you can, write down every feeling that you've had in the last 24 hours. Every feeling you've had in the last 24 hours. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds to do that, because if you're like most folks who come to our workshops, it will take you more than a few seconds, and that's okay. But what you'll see as you're writing right now is that there are a lot of things we feel in any block of time. Happy, sad, elated, depressed, stressed, overwhelmed, discouraged, hopeful, happy, sad, all of those things in a very, very short period of time. And so just becoming aware in this moment that, wow, there is a slipstream of emotions that are going through us. And I wonder what it might be like to have some degree of control over those. And then what could I possibly be able to do with that?
So I'll share, Walt. One of my emotions in the last 24 hours is gratitude for a number of reasons. One of them is I get to be here today with you and everybody on the webinar. I'm grateful. I was not feeling well earlier in the week. I never get sick. Oddly, I got sick. I feel better. But also go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm grateful too, but I got really, really stressed out about 3 minutes before our webinar because we had a technical problem.
Yeah.
So I came in stressed, but now feeling happy to be having this opportunity. So it goes up and down all day long.
But I'm also grateful because I have a daughter at Auburn, and last night Auburn beat Alabama in basketball. And anytime Auburn beats Alabama is a good day. So I can tell you when we do these exercises with large groups, it's very powerful. And to go around the room and to listen to the emotions, people could write down 10, 12, 14 different emotions in a 24-hour time frame. So there is a lot of yin and yang. So shall we move on?
We shall move on.
Okay. So wanted to share with you a few self-awareness strategies. And here is a list, and we'll just cherry pick a few. One of them is to stop treating your feelings as good or bad. They're really just states and signals to you on how to then react. Observing the ripple effect from your emotions is very, very important, especially for leaders. For instance, there are 3 toxic things that great leaders never do. They don't play favorites, they don't use informal threats to fire people, and they don't address poor performance in groups. So the ripple effect from your emotions, if you are having a bad day as a leader and you draw down on an employee in front of other employees, which we've all seen in our careers, it impacts the team. It impacts the esprit de corps. So you really need to observe what's going on. And then also know who and what pushes your buttons. These are triggers, and we all have triggers. So knowing who and what pushes your buttons is a big step in getting the self-awareness train on the right track. And basically, knowing who and what pushes your buttons is the basis for the self-management material that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I love that. We've gone through this deck a number of times, and I'm actually getting on an airplane for a conference on Monday. And all of a sudden, as you're going through this slide, I'm feeling a bit triggered and anxious because what pushes my buttons are all of the hoop, love to travel, but all of the hoop jumping can be very, very stressful. And I'm just like very aware right in this moment, oh, that's coming. And that will push my buttons. And what do I need to do to become more resourceful in that moment? But the thread I wanted to pull on here was where you feel your emotions physically. So this comes back to what I shared earlier around how we're hardwired from our reptilian brain all the way to our frontal cortex. We still pick up those sensations, those triggers, those environmental things in our bodies before. It could be microseconds, but we pick them up in our bodies before. And one of the things I want to invite you to do is to get really clear and grounded about where you yourself pick your emotions up before you're actually aware of them in your brain. So, for example, I actually began to feel that travel trigger as Carl was talking, right kind of in below my diaphragm. I will pick up stress and overwhelm in my upper back and in my jaw. I will pick up anxiety in my solar plexus. And so I'm able to name, if I'm feeling a tightness here, it's like, oh, what is that? Oh, it's stress. What is that stress about? Or the anxiety in the jaw and in the up, what is that about? And with that awareness, I have a greater window in which to act and respond mindfully. So my invitation is, begin to identify where you feel those emotions before you actually think about them.
I like that. And it's again, an alert system. It's no different than the light in your car. So a few more self-awareness strategies. It's helpful to stop and ask yourself why you do the things you do. Back to the triggers. When I was chatting with Walt the other day, I told him I made the mistake of going into a Whole Foods. I needed and wanted some bananas, and I was passing Whole Foods, so I pulled into the parking lot. And as I walked into Whole Foods, I said, this is a mistake. I don't like Whole Foods, but I wanted the bananas. So I went in and I got the bananas, but I got aggravated because I was in Whole Foods, and I promptly left after paying for the bananas. And then as I was driving out, I said, why did I do that? I know Whole Foods does that to me. So it's helpful to stop and ask yourself why you do the things you do. Spotting your emotions in books, movies, and music is also very helpful. Netflix series, The Crown, Succession, any of those series on Netflix, you maybe gravitated to one or more of those because they echo or mirror your emotions. And another kind of a hack that's interesting is if you're on a plane, I know Walt said he's going to be on a plane, and you're watching a movie, try watching the movie without sound and try to figure out what is going on in the movie based on body language or reading what you're seeing without hearing the dialogue. That's very, very helpful for you to be able to figure out what's going on in the room. And then getting to know yourself under stress is very helpful. So for 30 plus years, I practiced law, much like Walt. And I found that before I went to court for whatever reason, whether it was for an oral argument, whether it was for a trial, I would naturally get nervous because it meant something to me. And those nerves never went away throughout my entire career. But I found on the drive to court, that's where I settled everything in my mind and got ready to go into court. So I knew how I would react under stress, and that was my way of dealing with it. I found, interestingly, during the pandemic, when the judicial department switched to Teams, basically Zoom court, that I didn't have that mechanism. And in fact, it was a bit of a handicap because if I had an argument at 10 o'clock in the morning, I might be down in my partner's office at 5 of and say, oh gosh, I have an argument in 5 minutes. And then I'd have to run into my office, throw on the headphones, and we were live. I didn't have that time to work the stress, the kinks, the nerves out. So I was not a big fan of Zoom court. A lot of the younger generation is, but I would much rather have been, and I enjoyed much more being in court because it ebbs and flows like the tide. There's a pulse, there's a heartbeat to a courthouse. And that's how I dealt with the stress. So that was my self-awareness strategy. I knew going into court, for the most part, there would be stressful times, and that's how I dealt with it.
Carl, I've heard the Whole Foods story now enough times, right? If I were your EQ coach, I might invite you to consider how you could take the same principle that you learned in court and apply it to that moment that you find yourself driving for those bananas. But that's another day. But related to that, even before you get to these moments, as I said to you, as I shared a few minutes ago, checking in with yourself frequently. You know, how am I feeling right now? What am I feeling right now? What's coming up for me right now? Being much more mindful around how it is we are in any particular moment gives us so many more choices.
Right. So We're going to move on to self-management now, but I wanted to share a personal anecdote story with you where I dub it the perfect storm. It's where self-awareness and self-management collided, and it involved really the good, the bad, and the ugly. So a few years back, I was on a business trip and I was traveling to Denver. And, you know, to Walt's point about air travel, getting to Denver from Connecticut is not easy. And flying, as we all know, is a full contact sport. I ultimately made it to Denver and I checked into my hotel, and there was no acceptable reason why my room should not have been ready. Well, in fact, it was not ready. And I did not act appropriately with the person working the front desk. I finally got a room key. I got on the elevator with my roller bag, and as I went up to my floor to get into my room, I caught myself and I said, that was not the way to act. I am the father of 2 daughters, and I thought one of the desk clerk was about the age of one of my daughters. And I thought, would I want somebody like me or anybody treating my daughter that way? And I did not even get to my room. I turned immediately around, went down through the lobby, still with my roller bag, went across the street to a Starbucks, got a gift card, came back into the hotel, and I apologized. I went to the front desk and I chatted with the young lady who checked me in, and I apologized to her for my conduct, and I gave her the gift card and I said, please buy yourself a coffee and buy your friend a coffee. And that was that. And I told that story to a friend, 𝗓𝐂𝐓𝐿, who's an author and a TED Talk and leadership coach. And he asked me if he could write about that. And I said, sure, write about it. And he, in fact, did. In November of 22, he put out on his blog, and he captioned the article, "Great Leaders Apologize Well." I did not view that as a leadership move, but 𝗓𝗓 captured it and said, in fact, was, because I made amends promptly. So that's where my self-awareness and my self-management kind of coalesced. And that's how I'd like to kick off the self-management part of our chat this afternoon. And that was, I owned that. That was totally on me, but I addressed it immediately. And I was happy that I did address it immediately. There was no need to let it fester. And the front desk clerk said, you didn't have to do that. And I didn't, but I wanted to, and I did. So self-management is what happens when you act or don't act. It's your ability to recognize your triggers and tendencies and use your awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and direct your behavior. And again, deductively, it's dependent on your self-awareness. So I talk about beach vibes. So what lies beyond the beach vibes? And what this really is it's a nod to Jimmy Buffett and Margaritaville. And it's really about changing our emotional state in an instant. So why talk about Jimmy Buffett? Well, obviously we lost Jimmy last year, as you know. His most iconic hit was Margaritaville. And in 1978, Jimmy Buffett released his first live album. It was called You Had to Be There. And he's talking in the lead up to Margaritaville. And he said, a lot of people ask me, where the hell is Margaritaville? And my answer is, it's anywhere you want it to be. So what Jimmy Buffett did is turn that one song, Margaritaville, into a nearly $2 billion, B as in Bravo, $2 billion a year empire. 33 hotels, 150 restaurants, bars, and cafes. So he sold a lifestyle. And the CEO of Margaritaville Holdings has a great quote, which I'll share with you. He says, Margaritaville is a synonym for paradise and casual fun, and the brand generates an emotion that makes you feel good. So it's all about this emotion and how you can change it in an instant. And Clint Black has a song called State of Mind, where he says, he sings, a melody can bring back a memory, take you to another place in time, completely change your state of mind. So we can do that. And how can we do that? Well, we've got the triad. We can change our emotional state anytime we want in an instant. And the foundation of the triangle is physiology. This is the fastest way to change our mindset because, as Walt said, we do our emotions. We do our emotions, and then we feel them, and we can switch them up in seconds. So an example of this is in 2019, Gary Woodland was leading in the US Open after 3 rounds, PGA Tour event. And he was going into the 4th round and the 4th and final round. And overnight, his caddy texted him this one sentence. His caddy texted him and said, "Every man dies, but not every man lives. And you live for this moment." And Woodland went on to win the tournament. And he said, "But for that text from my caddy, I fall apart on Sunday." So that caddy just changed his mindset and put him in a good frame of mind and led him to victory. Second way is focus. It's really where we put our intentions. You could, as a leader or as a business person, wake up in the morning and say, what crap is going to hit the fan today? Or what opportunities, what amazing opportunities are going to come our way? Basically, where we focus or what we focus on, we see. 2 years ago, I was looking for a pickup truck. I had never driven a pickup truck. Once in my mind, I focused on buying a pickup truck. All I saw were pickup trucks. And if I test drove a particular brand, a Ford, all I saw were Fords. And then I test drove a Chevy. All I saw were Chevys. So it's focus. What we focus on, we see. And the third way is language, how we can change our emotional state. We create stories in our head. Some are true, some are not true. Some are resourceful, some are not resourceful. A great and powerful shift is if you debrief after an event. After every deposition, the next day I would be out running or riding, and I would say, I did that very well yesterday, or, oh, I screwed that up. A little mindset shift was, what did I do well, or what could I do differently? It's a little more gentle on yourself, and language helps. And again, it's a mindset thing. There's this guy, Chris Doris, he's a mental toughness coach, and he tells this story about he's driving down the highway and a rock gets picked up and shatters his windshield. And he said, instead of getting really ticked off that I had a shattered windshield, I looked at the windshield and said, "Hey, windshield, thank you for saving my life." So it's just a mindset thing. And we can use, if you use these tools, we can, again, change our state of mind in an instant. So here are a few self-management strategies. Breathing right. It sounds pithy, but it's accurate. Shallow breaths. When we breathe shallow, carbon dioxide builds up and it spikes anxiety. So breathing right is actually and really a thing. Setting aside time in your day for problem solving. I mentioned riding and running. I'm a big believer in the self-management side of the ledger that we're discussing. In order to lead others, you need to lead yourself. You need to be able to manage your own affairs. If your own house is not in order, then frankly, you can't lead others. Part of my self-management is a fitness and wellness component without which I couldn't get through the day or the week. I do these things in the morning. In the morning, when I'm doing that, that's when I am solving problems and I have ideas. It got to the point at my law firm where when I would meet with a friend or I'd knock on a partner's door and I'd say, "Hey, Walt, I have an idea." And Walt would roll his eyes and say, "Oh, you went out running this morning." Everybody that I worked with knew that I had my ideas when I was out running or riding. I mean, if you go out and run 5 miles, it may be 40 or 50 minutes, and I never ran with earbuds or AirPods. So it was just me and my own thoughts, and I got a lot solved. I wrote closing arguments on runs and rides. So it's really important to set aside time in your day for problem solving. And taking control of your self-talk is another important one. And you see I've got a little emoji there of a devil. And what that is I call it the doubt devil. When you're about to do something, the doubt devil pops up on your shoulder and starts peppering you, hammering you with doubt that you can't do this. So what I do with the doubt devil is a simple hack. When I was a kid lawyer, I took the bar at age 24, age 26, 2 years later, I'm in federal court in front of a jury, my first ever jury trial. And I got up in front of the jury and I gave my closing argument. Barely 27 years old, shaking in my boots, but I didn't let them see me sweat. And I delivered my closing argument. And this is in 1991. And 33 years later, I still look at the transcript from that. I knew back then that that was a pivotal moment in my career. And I asked the court reporter and I ordered and paid for a copy of the transcript of my closing argument. And I read that every now and then. I pull it out and I read it. And I say to myself, if I was a 26-year-old kid in federal court delivering a closing argument, then I can do whatever task is in front of me. So that's how I take control of my self-talk. And that's how I address the doubt devil.
Love that. So a couple things on this second list. So important, sleep. Most of us who are high achievers, I would include most of us who are here in our audience today, we're not getting enough sleep. Our bodies physiologically, for the most part, require somewhere between 7 and 9 hours a night. I was a single dad for a dozen years, raising 3 young boys on my own while managing my law firm. I had hair back then. I thought that I could muscle through with 5 hours of sleep a night. It was not sustainable. Lack of sleep lowers our focus, our acuity, our productivity, our resourcefulness, our resilience. It makes us more short-tempered. It actually makes us stupid, both in our intellectually based decisions as well as in our emotional decisions. So paying attention to your sleep hygiene is critically important. If you did one thing as a result of our time together today that would help with your emotional intelligence, it would be getting more sleep. The other thing, Carl, and we didn't talk about it, so forgive me for inserting this here, but as you were talking about your daily practices around writing and exercise, I was thinking a fundamental practice that I have that I now take for granted after 30 years is a meditation practice. Meditation allows you to slow the action down inside your mind. And so those are self-management strategies that I think are really valuable to look at and to consider how you might incorporate them into your lives.
And I'll pull on that thread, and you're never too old to start that practice. And I speak authentically here because I never meditated until about 2 years ago. I started, and I learned from my youngest daughter, who does like to meditate. She taught me how to meditate. So it was an inverse teacher-student situation there, where I learned the power of meditation from my youngest daughter. And yes, it is very helpful. Another self-management strategy that I just wanted to touch on is visualization. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Visualizing yourself succeeding. In every endurance event that I've ever been in, every marathon, every road race, every 100-mile bike ride, I allow it to unfurl in front of me before I do it, because then I'm able to walk through the steps. It's no different than a trial. I would walk into court envisioning how this was going to proceed. Now, you have to stay flexible because things come at you, as we all know. But if you visualize yourself completing the ride or completing the run, you're more likely to succeed. It's a great self-management strategy. I also like the stay synchronized. Life is rhythmic. We all have routines, and there is comfort in the routine. So my law office, we opened an office in DC back in 2001 or 2, and I would go down to that office with some regularity. And I tried to manage and maintain my synchronicity and my routines in DC. I would run the same routes in the city. I would eat the same breakfast that I ate in Connecticut. I would go to work at the same time, even though the DC office many times wouldn't open till 10 in the morning. But I would be in there at 7:30 because that's when I was in the Hartford office. So staying synchronized helps you to manage really what's going on. All right, so those are a few self-management strategies. And another big one is that no is a complete sentence. And this is a really, really powerful word, and it's a very powerful tool. If you're here today, you have undoubtedly a service mindset, a leadership mindset, and we are all in service to a lot of folks. If you think about the wheel of service, you may have a partner, domestic, business, or otherwise. You have colleagues, you have friends, you have employees, you have family members, you have communities, you may have church obligations. We're all in service to the people on that service wheel. And if we don't mind our own affairs, then we're going to be offline and we can't be in service to anybody. So saying no to things that come along, in fact, says yes to a lot of other things. It opens doors to the service that you can perform. So it's very helpful to keep that in mind. And again, I'll share a personal anecdote. When our first daughter was born, my wife was nursing her, and we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, and I've never forgotten this 24 years later, remember, a hungry mother cannot feed her child. Basically, take care of yourself so that you're able to take care of this child. And that stuck with me, and I've never forgotten that. A hungry mother cannot feed her child. And again, we are in service to a lot of people. And saying no helps us show up for those that we are in service to.
And before you jump further, I just love the way where you went with that, Carl, because what you said is true, that for most of us, saying yes is a default response. And when we can slow that internal action down, we can ask, is this yes? We only have a finite number of yeses to give in our lives. Is this yes really in the highest service to others? Is this yes going to serve my self-care so that I can serve others? Or is this yes simply another capitulation to feeling important or successful or needed or necessary, things we all like, but don't necessarily leave us with the personal resourcefulness that we know that we need to go the distance. And so again, kind of a key takeaway, friends, in terms of sharpening your emotional intelligence is saying no more often.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting. I chair a board of a organization in Hartford, and we interview prospective board members. And during the interview process, you can really read what's going on. And we've had many prospective board members during the interview process. They were telegraphing that they were simply checking a box, that there was some obligation in their professional service firm where they needed to do community service, and this was it. So they were trying to say yes, but it just wasn't, they weren't passionate about it. So saying yes for just simply to check a box doesn't serve you or an organization you purportedly are helping it doesn't serve anybody. So no is very powerful. So we'll just touch briefly on the two other, the social awareness and the relationship management. And again, we're not going to do a deeper dive on these today because the self-awareness and self-management were so foundational. That's what we wanted to talk about. And again, you need to master the self-awareness and self-management because they are, not to get lawyerly, but they're conditions precedent to the social awareness and relationship management. And again, social awareness is the ability to accurately pick up on another's emotions and understand what's really going on with them. And in order to practice the social awareness, you need to be curious, attentive, and caring. And you need to spot and understand things while in the maelstrom. And I will just share one anecdote with you on social awareness that I've used in my training. I did a lot of litigation in Connecticut involving defective concrete. And literally the concrete upon which the houses were sitting was crumbling. A few years back, I was taking the deposition of a homeowner. He was a retired homicide detective from one of the largest cities in America, a tough guy. And during the deposition, I could tell he was on the verge of breaking down. So at that very point, I had a decision to make. I could step on this guy's neck and drive my point home, or I could lay off the gas, take a break, and allow him to gather himself. I chose door number 2 because it was the right thing to do. I looked at his lawyer. I said, we're taking a break. We took a break. We then resumed a half hour later, and I got what I wanted out of that deposition. Shortly thereafter, I was leaving, and he stopped me in the hallway, and all he said was thank you, and he shook my hand. That was it. Thank you. We later settled the case, and it was a good result for his client and a good result for my client. And the lawyer told me, but for the way I handled that witness in the deposition, that case never settles. So I was aware of what was going on. This guy was on the verge of having a breakdown in the deposition. And again, I could have stepped on his neck, but I decided that's not good for me. It's not good for him. It's not good for my client. So let's take a break. And that's what we did. So social awareness is really just picking up on what's going on, reading the room. And it's the ability to spot and understand things that are happening in the maelstrom, because we're all in the maelstrom. Things are coming at us fast and furious. And then finally, relationship management. It's the ability to use our awareness of our own emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. And this is critical, absolutely critical for team building. The more EQ that you have, the more there is for a more cohesive team. Again, a high EQ, you can understand and empathize with your team. You can communicate more effectively with your team. You can manage conflict more skillfully with your team and resourcefully. You can make better decisions, and you can inspire and motivate. I was on a call the other day talking about some clients that inspired and motivated me to run through brick walls for them. We had an obligation under the professional rules to represent clients zealously. Some got zealous on steroids. And the ones that got zealous on steroids were the ones that inspired and motivated me as their counsel. It's the same for leaders that we've all worked under or been on teams with. So those are a few thoughts on emotional intelligence.
And Carl, emotional intelligence, coming back to where we entered into this, is the single biggest predictor of success in business and in life. Lots of evidence for those of you who need it, but there's no question that EQ is the thing that separates mediocre business professionals and managers and leaders, even up into the C-suite, from those who really shine. And sometimes before I became a student of EQ, I'd often wonder why somebody like super smart, coming out of Harvard or Wharton, somebody with super brains would always get into trouble with their teams. I was called in last year to work with a brilliant managing partner of a law firm on Wall Street who was alienating everybody in the firm. This guy came from an Ivy League. I think he was Yale or Harvard. He could try a case, but he could not. He was the new managing partner and he was alienating everyone. And it's because he did not have the skills that we've been talking about today. And so dialing these skills in will take you and your team a long, long way. And a long way is a big number when it comes to emotional intelligence. As a business coach working with a company, if I can get someone a 10% return or a 15% return, I'm feeling like a superstar in that environment. But 1,500% when you lean into and invest in emotional intelligence training for yourself and for your team, that's a huge ROI, not only in the short term, but in the long term. And it all starts with the stuff that we talked about today. And my invitation to you today is for you to take one or two of the strategies that we shared with and play with them. Not everything works for everyone all of the time. My invitation is to take one thing away, a meditation practice. You don't have to ride crazy distances like Carl Fix or run crazy distances like Hampton, but maybe it's paying attention to your sleep hygiene. Maybe it's just becoming more aware of the emotions as they come up. But pick one or two things, and over the next 10 days or 2 weeks, my invitation is to playfully examine them and experiment with them and see how they might change how you show up from day to day and how you then will show up in your office, in your C-suite, in your workplace. I think you'll begin to see a difference. My second invitation to you is this work is really, it stacks on itself. As you can see, as Carl took you through the syntax today, the self-awareness stacks is the first foundation for self-management, and self-management becomes the condition preceding for being able to read the room, which then builds on how do we step into a room that's filled with conflict and drama and resolve that drama so that everybody can go on. The work stacks. And one of the things that Carl and I so love to do is to go into companies and organizations for profit, not for profit, and work with their teams for a day or over several days where we can make seismic changes in the level of the EQ, either at the management level, leadership level, and or at the across the personnel. And so what I've done just now is I've popped something over on the right-hand side. My invitation is, if you would like to go deeper with this, to book some time with Carl. Carl is a ninja at emotional intelligence. He is one of the most skillful experts I have ever had the privilege of working with when it comes to EQ. And so go over there on the right-hand side, and you click the green button that says go there, put your name and your email address in there, and somebody from one of our teams will circle back with you and set up a no obligation call to talk about where you might be in your own leadership journey, in your own leadership evolution, where you might be with your team, what you might see as opportunities for your team, for your organization to go deeper around the emotional intelligence that's there. I promise you that even the 15 minutes with Carl will have a huge return on investment itself, regardless of what you decide. But I know that if you leaned in and worked with Carl and had Carl work with your teams, there would be incredible evolution for you and for your organization. And I am just, Carl, so grateful to have had this time with you. I want to honor the folks in our room and their time. Thank you so much, every one of you, for being with us today, for allowing us the opportunity to serve and support you in this hour. We wish you all the best in this year ahead. And Carl, that's what I got.
Well, thank you very much, Walt. And again, thank you everyone for your time and your interest. And Walt, thank you for your friendship and your collaboration on today's webinar. And again, as Walt said, what works for everyone or somebody doesn't work for everyone. And I share in the invitation to just be curious about one or more of the strategies that we shared today. I can promise you, you will show up better. I try to practice this and I show up better as a better father, as a better husband, as a better brother, as a better colleague. And it's paid dividends in my life. So again, I thank everyone for their time and their interest.
All right, friends, take good care. Please, please, please take advantage. Carl does not extend these invitations often. To have some time with him would be just hugely valuable. So go over there on the right-hand side, click that green button, and have some amazing time with the amazing Carl Fix. Make it a great rest of the day, great rest of the week. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.